Welcome back to the deep dive. Before we even get into the meat of today's discussion, I have a really quick request for you all.
Yeah, it's an important one.
Right. If you value the work we're doing here, digging into topics that the mainstream media generally refuses to touch, hit that like button and subscribe right now. We're building a network of people who want the unvarnished truth, and we really need you in the algorithm to make that happen.
Exactly, because today we are going into territory that is, well, let's just say it's not for the faint of heart.
Definitely not. We are looking at a source that is basically being called a counter-revolution in print. It's titled Performing Surgery on Yourself, The Way of the Hero by Conrad Riker. And, honestly, the author claims this is the most dangerous book ever written for men.
It's a really bold claim. But when you start peeling back the layers of what Riker is arguing here, you realize he isn't just talking about medical surgery. He's talking about a surgical excision of the modern conditioning that keeps men weak.
Right. And look, I'm going to be completely upfront with you guys listening. We are going to go really deep today, but if you want the full, uncensored experience, the actual manual for what we're discussing, you need to go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books right now and buy this ebook. What we're covering today is the map, but you are going to want the guidebook.
Yeah, for sure. The central premise here is incredibly provocative. Riker argues that the modern world, so our medical systems, our schools, our legal structures, it isn't just accidentally failing men. It is, to use his exact phrase, broken by design.
Broken by design. That phrase really hit me hard.
It implies intent, right? The argument is that these institutions have been completely captured by a specific ideological framework. He argues it's primarily a mix of feminist and Marxist theories that prioritizes safety, consensus, and emotional processing over competence and risk. Riker calls this a gynocentric worldview.
Now, I want to pause real quick, just to be absolutely clear up front for everyone listening. We are simply reporting on the ideas laid out in this text. We are not endorsing this political viewpoint or taking sides. We are just trying to convey the ideas contained in Riker's original material.
Right, absolutely. We're just unpacking the arguments Riker is making because, frankly, they are making massive waves, especially among men's rights activists and guys in the red-pilled manosphere.
Exactly. So according to the book, society is basically operating on an OS designed for women, and men are crashing the program just by being men.
That is the crux of it. The system views traditional masculinity, things like aggression, stoicism, risk-taking, as a pathology. It treats masculinity as a sickness that needs to be cured.
Which leads to this idea that if you are a man today, you're constantly told you're broken. But Riker flips that script entirely. He says, you aren't broken, you were broken down.
Precisely. And the only way out is to stop being a patient and start being a surgeon, to reclaim what he calls sovereignty.
So let's unpack this. Because the book starts with a pretty terrifying diagnosis of the healthcare system. Riker uses this term, emotional triage. What exactly does that mean?
It's a fascinating and, well, frankly, disturbing concept. Triage is usually how you sort the physically wounded in a disaster, right?
Right.
But emotional triage is Riker's theory that the medical establishment systematically prioritizes female suffering while treating male pain as something to be ignored, or even worse, psychologized.
Psychologize, like telling a guy it's all in your head.
Exactly that. Riker points to data showing a pattern where men come in with physical symptoms, dizziness, chest pain, chronic fatigue, and instead of running actual physical tests, the system asks about their anxiety or suggests therapy. The underlying assumption is that the male body is irrelevant and the real problem is his toxic stoicism.
He tells this story about an iron worker in Winnipeg that really illustrates this perfectly.
Oh, the guy with the blurred vision. It is tragic. He goes to the doctor complaining of severe dizziness. Now, this is a tough guy. An iron worker is not someone who complains over nothing. But the doctor just refers him to a psychologist for workplace stress.
So he is sitting in a therapist's chair while his head is completely spinning.
For 2 whole weeks.
Yeah.
When a neurologist finally sees him, they find a glioblastoma, a massive brain tumor. The system was so convinced that his problem was emotional, that he was just a broken man who couldn't process his feelings, that they missed a highly lethal physical threat.
That is absolutely terrifying. It's like the system has this default setting that men are just emotional projects waiting to be fixed.
Trent Raker contrasts this with the Yentl syndrome. Originally, that term meant women's heart attacks were missed because they didn't look like men's heart attacks.
Because the baseline was male.
Right.
Yeah.
But Riker argues it has been weaponized in reverse now. Now, men's conditions are missed because they don't present like women's. Women tend to advocate for their pain verbally. They talk about it. Men tend to just endure it.
So when a man finally breaks down and says, hey, it hurts, it is usually 5 minutes to midnight.
Exactly. But in a gynocentric system, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Since men don't squeak, they die. Riker literally calls this accepted collateral damage.
Wow. It's not just doctors missing a diagnosis, though. The book goes much deeper into the legal structure of our bodies. This part blew my mind year 1938.
The massive turning point. The Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act.
Because before that, if I had a sore throat, I could just go buy codeine, I could buy morphine. I was basically trusted to handle my own business.
You were the sovereign owner of your biology. But Riker argues 1938 was the moment the state effectively said men are too stupid to treat themselves. It shifted men from being owners of their own bodies to being wards of the state. You can't heal yourself anymore. You need a permission slip from a bureaucratic authority figure.
And if you try to take that ownership back, you get raided. He tells the story of the turmeric terrorist.
That story is wild. So this guy had severe chronic inflammation. The wait list for a specialist was like 6 months. He wasn't going to just sit around and wait in pain. So he built a lab in his garage, bought raw turmeric and industrial solvents, and chemically extracted his own high-potency tincture.
And it actually worked, right?
It completely cured his inflammation. But then the FDA raided his house. They seized his entire lab. Riker uses this to illustrate that the state views self-reliance as an inherent threat. If you treat yourself, you aren't a patient. You are a domestic bioterrorist. The system demands your dependency.
And that dependency training starts early, really early. The book talks a lot about the war on boyhood in modern schools.
This is where the broken by design thesis really becomes visible. We have a school system that is largely staffed by women, designed by women, for the temperament of girls. And it fundamentally punishes boys for just being boys. Roughhousing, fidgeting, the physical need to move. These are treated as clinical disorders.
Ritalin is the new leash.
It really is. We heavily medicate boys to make them sit still in classrooms that were never built for them. And then to cap it all off, we hand them participation trophies so no one ever has to feel the sting of losing. Riker contrasts this safetyism, which is a term he actually borrows from Jonathan Haidt, with the harsh reality that risk is where competence is born.
That line stuck with me for sure. Risk is where competence is born. If you never fall out of a tree, you never learn how gravity works.
And if you never feel pain, you never learn how to master it. Which brings us perfectly to the historical backbone of this book. Riker isn't just complaining about modern times, he is contrasting our era with the high-T civilizations of the past, specifically Sparta.
Right, the Spartan Doge. I mean, we've all seen the movies, but the specific historical details in the book are really gritty.
They are. But the most important detail Riker highlights isn't the sword fighting or the phalanx.
Yeah.
It is the whipping at the altar of Artemis Orthia.
Yeah, where they would whip the teenage boys until they literally bled and the crowd would just cheer. To modern ears, that sounds purely barbaric.
To the modern safety-obsessed mind, absolutely. But Riker argues it wasn't sadism at all. It was training. The Spartans understood that severe pain is inevitable in life and in war. The only variable you can control is your response to it. They were systematically training these boys to disconnect the physical sensation of pain from the emotional reaction of panic.
Spartans didn't file complaints.
That is what he calls the 300 principle. Elite performance isn't about motivation or feeling good or having high self-esteem. It is about eliminating failure. It's about filtering out the men who falsely believe that comfort is a human right.
And then you have the Romans. The book goes into detail about the legionnaires' kit.
Yes. A standard Roman soldier carried a sword, a shield, and a medical kit. Tweezers, bandages, opium. Why? Because he was fully expected to patch himself up. There was no medevac helicopter coming to save him.
The story about General Marius was incredible.
Gaius Marius. He had surgery on his varicose veins on his legs, fully awake with absolutely no restraints. He flat out refused to be tied down. He wanted to prove that the mind commands the flesh.
That is the literal definition of mind over matter. But Riker makes the point that this wasn't just ancient history, right? This mindset actually carried all the way through to the Enlightenment.
This is a crucial bridge in the book's argument. We tend to think of the Enlightenment as guys in powdered wigs writing constitutions. But Riker calls it the science of sovereignty. He introduces the Franklin framework based on Benjamin Franklin's method.
Test, observe, act, record.
It's a continuous loop. But Franklin applied it directly to his own body. He literally shocked his own paralyzed limbs with electricity. He was treating his body as a personal laboratory.
And then there is Werner Forssmann. This story, man, I almost winced reading it.
In 1929. The entire medical establishment said you couldn't put a catheter into the human heart. They thought it would be instantly fatal. Forsman completely disagreed. So he numbed his own arm, sliced open his own vein, threaded a urinary catheter 65 centimeters up his arm, walked down the hall to the radiology department, and took an x-ray of it, sitting inside his own beating heart.
That is just insane.
It is heroic. He won a Nobel Prize for it eventually, but at the time, they called him crazy and fired him. Riker's point is that true science is a masculine pursuit of truth, regardless of safety. But he claims it has now been infected by a demand for consensus and emotional safety.
Speaking of the masculine pursuit of truth, the book's take on Isaac Newton is very different from what I learned in grade school.
Oh, it's definitely not the textbook version. Riker paints Newton not just as a brilliant scientist, but as a ruthless warden of the Royal Mint. He personally hunted down counterfeiters in the dangerous London underworld and had them hanged.
He literally executed people.
He was a very hard man. Riker highlights that Newton viewed the feminine as entropy, basically chaos that dissolves order. He wrote his notes in complex ciphers to keep his knowledge secret. He believed truth had to be fiercely guarded. It is a stark contrast to today's inclusive science, where feelings are often given equal weight to hard facts.
So we've got the history, but the book is called Performing Surgery on Yourself. And in the second half, Riker stops with the historical metaphors and gets very literal. This is the Tools of Sovereignty section.
This is the part of the book that really makes you realize how soft we have become as a society.
Rick Schaefer, the elk hunter.
An incredible story of survival. He is miles deep in the wilderness. He gets gored by a massive elk. His lung is punctured. He is suffocating in the snow. He didn't have a cell signal to call for help. He used a multi-tool to slice open his own throat and inserted a plastic straw so he could breathe.
It's a plastic straw.
Plastic straw. And he walked out of the woods alive. Riker asked the listener the question, why did he survive? Not because he had a great health insurance plan, but because he absolutely refused to die. He had the mindset of a sovereign surgeon, not a passive patient.
And then Dave England. This was during the 2020 crisis, right? When the whole world was basically falling apart.
Right. When hospitals were running out of ventilators and these billion-dollar medical institutions were in full panic mode, Dave England is just a regular mechanic. He built a functioning ventilator out of a CPAP machine and spare Amazon parts.
In his garage.
In his garage. It perfectly proves Riker's point. The system profits immensely from your dependency, but you don't actually need the system to survive if you possess the skills yourself.
And of course, Aaron Ralston, the famous climber who amputated his own arm in the canyon.
The ultimate modern example of sovereignty. But Riker connects this to what he calls the philosophy of pain. He says pain is just data. It is just raw information.
Like the quote from Kyle Carpenter, he's the Marine who jumped on a live grenade to save his buddy.
The pain told me I wasn't dead.
That is, wow! It completely reframes the entire sensation of physical agony.
It is a total rejection of what Riker calls trauma culture. Modern therapy encourages men to wallow in their trauma, to make it their primary identity. But look at Louis Zamperini, the World War II POW, who was brutally tortured for years. He didn't come back home and demand a safe space. He integrated the pain, mastered it, and moved forward with his life.
It really seems like we've lost the physical places where men used to learn this stuff from each other. The book talks a lot about the network of iron and the death of male spaces.
This is a massive sociological tragedy, according to Riker. We used to have the Rotary, the Elks, the Masons. These weren't just drinking clubs for guys to hide from their wives. They were vital accountability structures.
I loved the anecdote he shared about the Moose Lodge.
The author's grandfather's story, where he says, if you missed 3 meetings, the brothers showed up at your house with a shovel.
Either you're digging the foundation for your new house, or you explain to us why you aren't man enough to show up to the meeting.
That is a form of love.
Yeah.
It is masculine love. It holds you to a rigid standard of excellence. But today, those spaces are either culturally illegal, or they get sued into oblivion for being exclusive.
Literally illegal in some places. The book mentions a Canadian tribunal ruling against a men's support group.
Because they excluded women. The state officially decided that men healing together in private was discriminatory, so they dismantled the group entirely. Riker argues this is deliberate institutional capture. If you destroy the places where men bond through duty and accountability, you leave them isolated with nothing but the modern void.
And in that modern void, you basically have 2 choices according to the book. You can be an NPC or you can be a player.
The non-player character.
Yeah.
The man who just blindly recites the lines society gives him. I am privileged. Masculinity is toxic. I need to share my feelings more. He is actively scripting his own obsolescence.
Versus the player.
The player realizes the game is completely rigged. He realizes the system is a casino, and he is destined to lose if he plays by their house rules. So he decides to play by his own rules. He becomes truly sovereign.
So, bringing this all back, what does this actually mean for the listener right now? Because we've covered a massive amount of ground today, from Spartan whips to plastic straw surgeries.
It means you have a fundamental choice to make. Riker's final provocation in the book is incredibly powerful. He says to the reader, "You are not broken. You were broken down by design."
That distinction really is everything.
It is. If you are broken, you need a doctor. You need an institution to save you. But if you were broken down, you just need to rebuild. You need to become the surgeon of your own life.
And that is exactly what this book is. It's a manual for the unbroken man. It's a counter-revolution against what Riker calls a dying West and the captured institutions that have systematically failed us.
And honestly, in a world that constantly tells you to be soft and weak, just reading this book is an act of rebellion.
100%. Look, we can only cover so much in a deep dive format. If you want the tools, the deep history, the absolute raw truth that we talked about today, you need to get the book yourself. Go to Amazon Kindle, go to Google Play Books, search for Performing Surgery on Yourself, The Way of the Hero by Conrad Riker. Buy it right now. Read it.
And don't just read it, actually use it. Support the author, because guys like Conrad Riker are taking a massive amount of heat from the establishment to get this message out to men.
Absolutely. You should also follow him directly to bypass the gatekeepers. He is at Conrad Riker on Twitter, and he has a Substack. Go find him. Get the red-pilled reality checks directly from the source.
And remember, the system only collapses if you choose to stand up. So stand up.
That's the ultimate takeaway. Stop waiting for permission. Which actually leaves me with a final thought for you to chew on. What if, the next time you feel physical or mental pain, instead of immediately looking for a pill or a practitioner to fix you, you just sit with it. Ask yourself what that pain is trying to teach you about your own sovereignty. Thank you for listening to this deep dive. Make sure you like and subscribe so we can keep bringing you this kind of forbidden knowledge. Until next time.
Stay sovereign.